have moved to other places to cause damage after the assemble at a police station at about 9 p.m. Some protesters took the MTR to go to Temple Mall outside Long Chang Road, and there was also road blockage of Long Chang Road, and there were protesters entering the MTR station at Wong Tai Sin to damage facilities inside, including CCTV. We were aware that some protesters boarded a bus heading towards Lam Tin at Long Chang Road, and there were inquiries made in relation to those who were on board of that bus. For details, I will defer to Madam Fu later. In relation to the stop search of the bus for investigation, I would have to point out that according to the police force ordinance, if the police found that anyone that we have reasonable suspicion that someone on board of any public transport vehicles has the intention or will commit any crime, then we have the power to stop and search. And I will now show you a video clip that will last about 1 minute. Well, because of technical problems, I will just proceed to describe the situation. In the clip, never mind. I'll just proceed to describe the situation. In the clip, you will see that, well, if you have watched different footage, you will find that our fellow colleagues have been saying, please to ask journalists to leave so that we can conduct the investigations on board the bus. This is based on a number of considerations. When a public transport vehicle has been stopped, it will be treated as a scene of crime, which is not suitable for press coverage. We will have to collect evidence at the scene of crime. We have to prevent people from interfering with the exhibits. We also have to take into consideration the security of the scene of crime. And during the investigation, there will be involvement of personal data and privacy, and we have to protect the same. It is our usual practice to set up police cordon line, and we have been doing the same. If necessary, we will continue to use the same practice to deal with scenes of crime. After we have completed preliminary investigation, we will arrest those that we have reasonable belief that they have committed a crime. We are aware that a number of reporters have been doing live cast of the situation. We have to consider whether arrestees will make use of these live casts to tip off other people at large. Anyone who obstructs or resists police officers who are in the execution of duty may be subject to offenses of a similar nature. We respect the freedom of the press, but we have to make this appeal now for the sake of safety of reporters. We would like to say that when the police is dealing with public order events, from time to time a police cordon line will have to be set up. And when there is a storming of this cordon line, say, for example, throwing of hard objects or petrol bomb, then we have to use appropriate force to neutralize the threat. And sometimes we have to disperse people in front of the cordon line, and we have to use corresponding level of force. If reporters go between protesters and police, then it may be dangerous. Let me give you another example. On the 31st of August, it was a time when the police was moving towards Admiralty from Harcourt Road near the Arts Centre. When the police passed under a flyover outside the police headquarters, there were rioters on the flyover throwing petrol bomb to attack police officers. You will see that on the left-hand side, under the flyover, there were police officers. On the right, on the flyover, there were rioters and a large number of reporters, and some we believe to be responsible or in charge of providing medical aid. At that time, our police officers have considered different ways to disperse the rioters on the flyover. However, there were other people present at that time. So when we used relevant tactics, we have to take all these into account. In relation to what happened outside the police station at Mongkok on the evening before last, there was an arrest made of a female. Afterwards, a large group of people surrounded our police officers. Punches were thrown. Other officers had to use the appropriate force in order to disperse the crowd. No one, for any purpose, should touch police officers or be too close to police officers or when police officers are executing their duties. We appeal to frontline reporters to maintain a safe distance from police officers doing their job. I will now defer to Mr. Lee in relation to updated information about possession of offensive weapons.
Thank you. And in recent violent protests, we saw situations in which offensive weapons were found. I'd like to explain how we categorize these weapons. We would refer to Cap 245 of the Hong Kong laws, Section 33, and that is possession of offensive weapons in a public place. So what is meant by an offensive weapon? So there is an explanation of these weapons under the second paragraph. So there are three types of weapons, and there are three broad categories. The first type, articles made for causing injury to other persons, and the second type, articles adapted for use in causing injury to other persons, and the third type, any article suitable for causing injury to other persons. So these are the three categories. I'd like to elaborate more about the two main types. First of all, slingshots. You can see slingshots very often. I saw it during a live broadcast yesterday, and people were using it to attack the Mongkok police station. Apart from using the item for attacking people, the item carries no other use, so it falls under the first category. It is considered a weapon. So if anyone is in possession of this item in a public place, it is clear that the item is used for launching an assault. The second type is a powerful slingshot like you see from the game Angry Birds. And rubber bands or other bands are used to hurl various objects. So you can see that such bands can be used as sport or rehab equipment, but upon modification, it can be used to sling various objects that can lead to injuries. And in that case, it falls under the second category. That is an article adapted for causing injury to other persons. According to the laws of Hong Kong, possession of these weapons in a public place can lead to imprisonment of up to 3 years. So I urge people who take part in the protests not to carry these items, or else if they are intercepted and found to be carrying these items, they can be brought to justice. I would now hand over to Mr. Kong. I would now report some figures from our operations yesterday. We arrested a total of 35 people yesterday, including 30 males and 5 males, aged between 14 and 39. The alleged offenses include taking part in an unlawful assembly, possession of offensive weapon, disorder in public places, and criminal damage. In terms of the overall arrest figures, as of yesterday, we have arrested a total of 1,183 persons. In terms of court cases, on the 2nd of September, the police arrested 3 men in Liking for alleged disorder in public places and possession of offensive weapon. Yesterday, the police charged one of the arrestees for possession of offensive weapon, and he has made a court appearance at the West Kowloon Magistrates Court. In our operations yesterday, there was no record of injuries to police officers. In terms of the use of ammunition, in our operations yesterday, we used 7 beanbag. We deployed 7 beanbag rounds at about 8 p.m. last night. About 100 protesters gathered outside Mong Kok police station, and they also barricaded the roads with miscellaneous objects at the junction between Prince Edward Road West and Nathan Road, and they also digged up bricks from the street. They hurled eggs, bricks, glass bottles, and stones at the police station, and they also shone laser beams at our offices. And like Mr. Lee said, sling shots were used to attack police officers. The police issued multiple warnings, but violent protesters still refused to leave, and as such, the police conducted dispersals. During the operation, protesters continued to hurl bricks, stones, and shot metal balls at the police station. So after the warnings were issued, the police deployed 7 beanbag rounds at the entrance of the police station, and in the 3 hours we were surrounded, we deployed 7 beanbag rounds, which are a non-lethal and non-penetrating weapon. The aim is to inflict pain on the violent protesters who refuse to leave. And at about 2 a.m., all the protesters left the scene. And I'd like to make some clarifications. According to some online rumors and reports, our police officers fired beanbag rounds at protesters without any warning. I'd like to reiterate our guidelines on use of force. We have very strict guidelines on the use of force. Our officers would consider the actual situation and threats on the site in deciding a proportionate and appropriate level of force, and after the aim is achieved, the use of force would be stopped. When using force where possible, the police would issue warnings. But we must understand that in the violent incidents in recent months, very often violent protesters or rioters would attack our offices in a split second, including hurling bricks or firing slingshots or even hurling petrol bombs. So these were very common. Those assaults happen in a split second. So in an urgent scenario, our officers might deploy force without warning, and this would not be in breach of our use of force guidelines. I would now hand over to Madam Fu to explain our operation at Kowloon East yesterday. Thank you. I would now explain the incidents at Kowloon East yesterday. At about 8:45 p.m., about 40 protesters took the MTR train to Wong Tai Sin Station from Mong Kok. Some protesters vandalized facilities in the MTR stations, including CCTVs. Such acts were in breach of the court injunction order. It was also contempt of court, and the protesters might have committed criminal intimidation. After they exited the station, they used miscellaneous items to obstruct the westbound lane of Longcheng Road and paralyze traffic and disrupted public order. Subsequently, the protesters boarded a bus towards Kwun Tong with an intent to cause further damage. It was about 9 p.m. yesterday. Some conscientious citizens reported the case to the police that a few dozen protesters boarded a bus towards Kwun Tong with an intent to cause damage. The police sent officers immediately and intercepted the bus for investigation. At 9:24 p.m., the emergency unit officers successfully intercepted this bus on Kwun Tong Road outside Kowloon Bay MTR station. At that time, about a dozen protesters hopped off the bus immediately at the sight of the police. The police pursued the suspects and managed to control the bus. And outside Amoy Gardens, we intercepted a suspect and seized masks, body armor, and laser guns. And there were more than 40 people on the bus at that time. And upon completing preliminary investigation, within a very short time, 11 citizens were allowed to leave. And during investigation, since the space was narrow and our officers were concerned that the suspects might carry offensive weapons and there was a likelihood that they could destroy exhibits, out of safety and investigative considerations, the police asked suspects to raise their hands within a very short time. So this is so the allegation that people were asked to raise their arms for a very long time was untrue. And 33 people were arrested for unlawful assembly and possession of offensive weapon.
Let me conclude that we have noticed that violence has spread to different districts in Hong Kong, and this violence trend has also spread on to youngsters. We also noticed that the age of violent rioters is getting younger and younger, and the offences involved is getting more and more serious. Say, for example, possession of petrol bombs and assault of other people. We're worried that youngsters may not fully be aware of the gravity of such offences. We condemn those with a hidden agenda for inciting youngsters to commit such serious crimes for their own purpose. It is our natural duty to maintain law and order in Hong Kong. We believe that Hong Kong people have discerning eyes. We use different channels. They have used different channels to see the seriousness and the prevalence of violence in protesters. So we appeal to general citizens to say no to violence.
In Mong Kok, Wong Tai Sin, and Hong Kong Island. At about 8 p.m., a large group of unruly protesters gathered outside Mong Kok police station, behaving in a disorderly manner. Not only did they point laser beams and barricades main roads, but they also shot metal balls with slingshots. Such violent acts pose a grave danger to the ordinary citizens as well as our officers on site. At around 9 p.m., some protesters traveled to Wong Tai Sin on MTR to carry on their rampage. Yet again, they vandalized the Wong Tai Sin station, smashing various facilities inside the station. After setting up barricades on Longcheng Do, they board a bus heading to Lam Tin. The police are duty-bound and determined to bring offenders to justice. Therefore, our officers got into the bus to carry out investigation. During the process, our officers politely asked the reporters on board to leave the bus due to a few reasons. First, privacy. During the inquiry, we will collect personal data from the suspects and must protect such information. Secondly, preservation of crime scene. We must take proactive measures to prevent suspects from ruining evidence like the offensive weapons they are carrying. Thirdly, chance of escape. We must prevent suspects from tipping off other offenders through live streaming of the press. Some offenders might exploit the media to forewarn others about the police arrest. Please note that it's an offense for a person to assault, resist, or deliberately obstruct the police in the execution of their lawful duties. The police always respect journalism and freedom of press, but we are aware that certain reporters stay very close to the point where they are rubbing shoulders with our frontline officers while they are carrying out their duties. During protest, when we are conducting dispersal operations, some reporters may stand in the way of our cordons as our officers are advancing through or using force. There are also occasions when radical protesters threw petrol bombs and offensive weapons at police cordons and hitting reporters who stood in between. It is very dangerous for reporters to be sandwiched between police and the protesters. And during violent incidents, it is indeed very difficult for our officers to distinguish between genuine reporters and protesters, or protesters who disguise as reporters. We appeal to bona fide members of the press to maintain a safe distance with our officers, especially when they are making arrests and carrying out dispersal operations. Now, I'll briefly talk about the offense of possession of offensive weapons. In brief, an offensive weapon is an article made or adapted for use or intent by the person having it in his possession for causing injuries to others. Therefore, some common device used by the protester, like slingshot and catapults, are certainly offensive weapons as defined by the Public Order Ordinance of the Hong Kong laws. Now, I'll give you a brief update on the arrest figures. Since yesterday, we arrested 35 people, aged between 14 and 39, consisting of 30 males and 5 females. Their offenses include unlawful assembly, possession of offensive weapons, and criminal damage. So in total, 1,183 people have been arrested since 9th of June. Now I'll briefly talk about a violent incident in Kowloon East yesterday. Our officers arrested 33 people, consisting 28 males and 5 females, for unlawful assembly and possession of offensive weapons in an operation in Kowloon Bay. As I mentioned earlier, around 40 radical protesters brought a bus heading to Lam Tin after they caused extensive damages to Wong Tai Sin MTR station. Their acts were in breach of an injunction order in force in MTR. Our officers spent every effort to prevent them from escaping, so they brought the bus in Kowloon Bay for investigation. After inquiries, our officers let 11 ordinary passengers go and arrested the 32 protesters on board. We have seized offensive weapons like laser guns and riot gears. In conclusion, the ongoing protests can be likened to an infectious disease spreading across the city and poisoning the minds of many young people. There is certainly no quick cure to this disease. Every person in society has a role to play in nursing Hong Kong back to health. We sincerely appeal to everyone, members of the public, to join us. Please make a clean break with all violent and criminal elements and put Hong Kong back on the right track. Thank you.
好，以下問題時間。咁